Hello, my name is Kimber S. Moore. The title of my article is How Schools Matter, the link between teacher classroom practices and student academic performance. The purpose of this article is to show the effects of classroom practices when added to those of other teacher characteristics or comparable in the size to those of the student background, suggesting that teachers can contribute as much to student learning as the students themselves. The reason for choosing this article is because I work at a Title I school, and over the past few years, teachers at our school have been trying to find ways to increase our students' academic level. This article tells us that we will have to rethink our own practices to construct new classroom roles and expectations about our student outcomes and to teach in ways that we never have taught before. So, this article will help us rethink practices, necessities, professional development that includes teachers in dual capacity of both teaching and learning, create new visions of what, when, and how teachers should learn. Quantitative studies of school effects have generally supported the notion that the problem of U.S. education lie outside of school. However, several qualitative studies were cited on focusing on the importance of teacher practices. The current study seeks to fill this gap in literature by using quantitative methods to study the link between student academic achievement and teacher classroom practices, as well as other aspects of teaching such as professional development teachers receive in support of classroom practices, and the more traditional teacher background characteristics referred to here as teacher input. A possible reason for lack of large school effects in quantitative research is the failure of such research to capitalize on insight for quantitative research, the central importance of classroom practices of teachers. The purpose of this study is to see if there is a link between student academic achievement and teacher classroom practices. Much of the discussion in the education reform hinges on the questions of where schools matter. Over the past decades, policymakers have called for improvement in the academic performance of U.S. students. Many educational reformers, particularly those associated with the movement, hold that the key to improving student performance lies in improving the schools. If academic standards are rigorous, curriculum and assessments are aligned to those standards, and teachers possess the skills to teach at the level of the standards demand, students' performance will improve. The background for this study says much of the quantitative literature linking school characteristics to student outcome focus on the impact of economic characteristics of the school resources. These studies are known as production functions. Another line of inquiry into the impact of school focuses on students, focusing on the social and organizational characteristics of the schools. Much of the quantitative research, which focused specifically on teaching, conformed to a similar pattern, finding little relationship between teacher input and student achievement. Yet, there have been little quantitative research into whether classroom practices in concert with other teacher characteristics have an impact on student learning that is comparable in the size to that from background characteristics. Quantitative research has tended to find that the effects of student background on student achievement and other outcomes far outshadow school effects. Some of the research has found no school effect at all, while other research has found effects that are at best modest. Spe- Specifically, in terms of teaching, such research have found that most characteristics of teachers do not matter and that few that do are not as important as student background. Yet such studies ignore quantitative work that suggests that certain classroom practices are highly conducive to the student achievement. If this is the case, then classroom practices may indeed explain a substantial portion of variance in student achievement. This study tests two hypotheses concerning teacher quality. Teacher quality has three aspects: the teacher's classroom practices, the professional development of the teacher receives in support of these practices, and the characteristics of the teacher external to the classroom, such as education attainment. The first hypothesis is that of these aspects of teacher quality classroom practices will have the greatest impact on the student academic performance, professional development the next greatest, and the teacher inputs the least. The rationale for this expectation is that the classroom is the primary venue in which students and teachers interact. Hence, decisions by the teacher as to what to do in this venue will most strongly affect student outcome. Teachers' input will be least likely to influence student academic performance because they do so less directly through encouraging classroom practices conducive to high student performance. Professional development falls somewhere between classroom practices and student input. It does occur outside the classroom, but is more closely tied to specific classroom practices than are teacher input. Second, it is hypothesized that teacher quality is strongly related to student academic performance and student background characteristics. When the effects from all three aspects of teacher quality are added together, the results will be comparable in the size to that of the student background. The rationale behind this expectation is that, as the qualitative literature suggests, student learning is a product of the interaction between students and teachers, and both parties contribute to this interaction. For this study, data on 7,146 eighth graders who took the 1996 mathematics assessment was analyzed. Eighth graders are used for this analysis because they were exposed to a wider range of subject matter than fourth graders, and teacher questionnaires are not available for 12th graders. Students' performance is measured from test scores on the assessment. Student background is measured utilizing 6 questions on the student background questionnaire: the father's level of education, the mother's level of education, whether there are 25 or more books in the home, whether there is an encyclopedia in the home, whether family subscribes to a newspaper, and whether family subscribes to a magazine. The three aspects of teacher qualities are measured from a background questionnaire completed by the mathematics teacher. Three teacher inputs are measured: the teacher's educational level, whether the teacher major or minor in the relevant subject area, mathematics or math education, the teacher's years of experience. 10 measures of professional development are used: the amount of professional development teachers received last year and whether teachers received any professional development in the last 5 years in the topics of cooperative learning, interdisciplinary instruction, higher order thinking skills, classroom management, portfolio assessment, performance-based assessment, cultural diversity, teaching special needs students, and teaching limited education proficient students. Finally, 21 classroom practices are utilized: assessing, addressing algebra, addressing unique problems, addressing routine problems, using textbooks, using worksheets, having students talk about mathematics, have students write reports, having students solve problems that involve writing about math, having students work on objects, having students work with blocks, having students solve real world activities, having students hold discussions in small groups, having students write a group paper, having students work with partners, assessing student progress from tests, assessing student progress from multiple choice tests, assessing student progress from tests involving constructive response. The student path model simply measures the covariance between SES and the student academic performance. The school level factor model generates as SES constructs from the student's mean of 6 measures of student background, and an academic constructs from the school mean of a single test score. In addition, class size, teacher years of experience, educational attainment, and major are constructed from individual measures that correspond to these constructs. The school path level model treats student academic performance as a function of the other constructs. Professional development and teacher input to student academic performance, and one other, taking into account student SES and class size. The student level factor path models are the same as teacher input models. This model relates to classroom practices, professional development, and teacher input to student academic performance, and one another, taking into account the SES class size. Student level factor and path model remains the same as the prior model. Early versions of the school level factors and path models include SES, class size, teacher input that proves significant in the teacher input model, the amount of time and professional development, the topics of professional development that prove significant in the professional development model, and all 21 classroom practices. The final school level factor and path model is included only those classroom practices that prove significantly related to student achievement. The final classroom level factor model constructs the teacher of higher order thinking skills from a single measure, solving unique problems, the teaching of lower level thinking skills from single measure, solving routine math problems, engaging in hands-on learning from 3 measures, working with blocks, working with objects, and solving real-world problems. Assessing student progress through traditional testing for 2 measures, multiple choice testing, and the overall frequency of testing, and assessing students' progress through an authentic assessment from 3 measures, a portfolio assessment, individual projects, and constructive response. The SES class size assessment, teacher input, and professional development constructs are handled as in a professional development model. The school path model relates these classroom practices constructs to the student achievement construct, relates the professional development constructs to the classroom practice construct, and relates the teacher input. SES and the class size to professional development, class practices, and student development achievement construct. The data on teacher inputs indicates that 8th grade math teachers are most likely to possess less than a master's degree, higher major or minor in mathematics or math education, and have 10 or more years of experience teaching. Approximately 40% of 8th graders have teachers who possesses a master's degree or more, with the remainder possessing a bachelor's degree or less. Approximately 7% of eighth graders have teachers who major or minor in mathematics or math education. The rest have teachers who are teaching off topic, and approximately 60% of eighth graders have teachers with more than 10 years of experience. The data on professional development indicate that while most teachers receive some professional development in some topics, that professional development tends not to be of long duration, and certain topics tend to be neglected. Most eighth graders have teachers who receive some professional development in the last 5 years in most common topics, such as cooperative learning or interdisciplinary instruction. But only one third of eighth grade have teachers who receive professional development and cultural diversity. One quarter have teachers who receive professional development and teaching students with special needs, and 1/10 have teachers who receive professional development and teaching LEP students. And regardless of the topic of professional development, only a minority of students have teachers who receive more than 15 hours of professional development last year. The prevalence of classroom practice varies greatly. While much of the material covered in the eighth grade involves issues of operations and measurement, teachers do cover more advanced topics. More than half of all students are exposed to algebra and one quarter of geometry. The kinds of problems students are taught to solve tend to involve a routine set of algorithms. 4 out of 5 students commonly work with such problems, as opposed to about half of the students working with problems that involve unique situations. All students report taking a math test at least once a month. The nature of the test varies. However, typically students take tests that involve extended written response. More than half do so at least once a month. About one-third of the students take multiple choice tests. Students are assessed through individual projects and portfolios. Also, about one-third of the students at least once a month. Hands-on activities appear quite infrequent. Just one quarter of the students work with objects, and just 1/10 work with blocks. Problems with concrete or practical bent that addresses real-world situations are very unusual. However, with 3/4 of the students encountering such problems at least once a week, writing about mathematics is fairly uncommon, with just one-third of the students doing at least once a week. Group activities vary their frequency. Most students discuss math in small groups, but only a minority of students solve problems in groups or work on problems with a partner. Finally, textbooks and homeworks in eighth grade classrooms are obsolete. Nearly all students use textbooks at least once a week, and most do some homework every day. This study suffers from 4 basic shortcomings. First, the data is cross-sectional. The information about the aspect of teacher quality is collected at the same time as the student test scores. Consequently, it is not possible to draw inference about the direction of the casualty for the relationship that were discovered. It may be that a focus on higher order thinking skill causes increased student performance, or it may be that having high performing students drives teachers to focus on higher order thinking skills. The likelihood of the latter scenario is somewhat reduced in the model that takes SES and class size, both proxies of prior academic performance of the student and school, into account. Nonetheless, to confirm the causal direction hypothesized in this study, consequently research should replicate the results using longitudinal data. Second, the study covers only one grade level in one subject. It is possible that different sets of classroom practices will prove effective for other subjects at other grade levels. Third, this study does not measure the link between the aspects of the teacher quality and the relationship between the test scores and the students. Despite these methodological shortcomings, the current study represents an advance over previous work. The first model, to some extent, exemplifies the traditional approach to gauging the impact of teaching and other school characteristics on student achievement. The independent variables consist of teacher research. This model finds no significant relationship to test scores for the most part, characteristics with the exception of the teacher's college level classwork as measured by the major or minor in the relevant field. The first hypothesis that of the aspect of teacher quality classroom practices will have the greatest effect is confirmed. The second hypothesis that the total impact of the teaching variable will be comparable to that of the student's SES is also confirmed. In addition to confirming the hypothesis regarding the impact of the teacher on student learning, the study uncovers important interrelationships among the aspects of teaching. For one, professional development seems to influence teachers' classroom practices strongly. The more professional development teachers receive in hands-on learning, and indeed, the more professional development they receive regardless of topic, the more likely they are to engage in hands-on learning activities. This study finds that schools matter because they provide a platform for active as well as opposed to passive teachers. Passive teachers are those who leave students to perform as well as their own resources will allow. Active teachers press all students to grow regardless of background. Passive teaching involves reducing eighth grade mathematics to the simplest component. Schools that lack a critical mass of active teachers may indeed not matter much. Their students will be no less or more able to meet high academic standards than their talents and home resources will allow. But schools that do have a critical mass of active teachers can actually provide a value added. They can help their students reach higher levels of academic performance than those students otherwise would reach. Through their teachers, then schools can be the key mechanism for helping students meet high standards.